The monitor's flat, pupils fixed. There's nothing more we can do for her.
Her jaw's still clenched. The dead let go of everything, Doctor.
Nurse, step back. I've already made the assessment.
Her heart's still there. Just slower than your machine can read.
Get away from her. Someone can. Get her away from my daughter.
Watch. Sir, I haven't touched it. Look at the monitor. That's her heart. It never stopped, Ad. It only slowed. She was never dead. She was hidden. There's a difference.
Who are you?
The line on the monitor had gone flat, and a doctor had already signed the paper that made it official. 2 in the morning, a private wing that smelled of money and antiseptic, and a 10-year-old girl lying under a sheet that had not yet been pulled over her face. Her father, an ambassador, stood in the hall and could not go back into the room. The staff spoke in the low voices people use around the dead, and the woman they had almost sent home an hour before, a night nurse in worn shoes, a plain badge that read only Gallagher, B, RN, set down her paper cup of cold coffee and looked at the child longer than a stranger should. Everyone in that hallway believed the worst thing had already happened. Only one of them believed it hadn't. Her name was Beatrice Gallagher, and she had learned a long time ago not to be noticed. It was a useful thing, being overlooked. You saw more when no one thought you were looking. You heard the truth people only spoke when they forgot the woman changing the linens had ears. For 11 years she had worked nights in one wing or another, and she had made herself into furniture, dependable, quiet, easy to walk past. And if there were parts of her life she never mentioned, no one ever asked a night nurse where she had been before. She was not a small woman, and she had stopped apologizing for it years ago. There was a kind of authority in the way she carried her weight, the way a river carries its own, unhurried, certain, impossible to rush. Her hands were steady in a way that younger hands were not, and there was a pale seam of scar across her right thumb that she rubbed sometimes without knowing it. When people asked, she said kitchen knife, and they believed her, because it was easier than the truth, and the truth was not theirs to have. That night had begun like any other. A quiet floor, 2 post-surgical patients sleeping, the hum of machines, and the squeak of her own shoes on wax tile. She had always thought the quietest part of the night was also the most honest, the hour when no one performed, when the sick stopped pretending to be brave, and only the truly patient remained. Then, just past midnight, the elevator opened and the whole shape of the night changed. They came in fast and low-voiced. A man in a good suit that had been slept in, 2 others behind him with the flat, watchful eyes of men whose job was other people's safety, and between them, a gurney, and on it, a girl. 10 years old, dark hair fanned back across the white linen, a face the color of candle wax. The man in the suit was the ambassador, though Beatrice did not know it yet. She only knew a father when she saw one, because a father's fear has a particular sound, and he was making it, low in his throat. She collapsed at dinner, he kept saying. She was laughing, and then she was on the floor. She was fine, and then she wasn't. Dr. Reed took the case because Dr. Reed took the cases that came with important names attached. He was not a cruel man, exactly. He was a tired one who had decided long ago that certainty was the same thing as competence. He wore his confidence like a pressed coat, buttoned high, and he had worn it so long he had forgotten it was something he had put on. Beatrice was assigned to the room because someone had to be, and she was the one no one would miss elsewhere. She stood at the foot of the bed while Reed worked and did what she always did. She watched. She let the room tell her things it did not know it was telling. The girl, Mila, the father said, "Her name is Mila, please," was cold to the touch, colder than she should have been. Her pupils were fixed and wide. Her pulse, when Beatrice found it, was so faint and so slow that a hurried thumb would have called it nothing at all. Reed's thumb was hurried. The monitors, set for ordinary human rhythms, could not find a rhythm slow enough to believe in, and so they showed him what he expected to see. A girl already gone. Time of collapse? Reed asked, and the father told him, and Reed did the arithmetic in his head, and his face closed like a door. He asked about medications and allergies, and the father answered in the broken half-sentences of the terrified, and none of it changed the shape of what Reed had already decided he was looking at. Beatrice had seen that arithmetic before, in a place she never named, with sand in her teeth and a boy going cold in her arms. She knew what it looked like when a doctor decided the math was already finished. A particular slackening in the shoulders, a shift from fighting to managing. The body gave it away long before the mouth did. She leaned closer. She only looked the way she had been trained to look a lifetime ago, not at the numbers, but at the person the numbers were failing to describe, and what she saw made the skin on her arms go tight. The girl's lips were not the blue of the truly gone. They were pale, yes, but under the pallor there was the faintest warmth of color, like a coal banked under ash, waiting. Her jaw was not slack. There was a tension in it, a small, stubborn clench that the dead do not have, because the dead let go of everything. And when Beatrice laid 2 fingers against the side of the girl's throat and simply waited, not hunting, not pressing, only waiting the way you wait for a shy animal to trust your open hand, she felt it, once. Then, an impossible while later, again. A heartbeat, slower than any living heart had a right to be, so slow that the seconds between one beat and the next stretched out like a held breath. But there, unmistakably, stubbornly, there. "Doctor," she said. Reed did not look up, not now. "Doctor," her jaw. "Nurse." He said the word the way some men said it, as a fence, a way of putting her back on the far side of something. "I've made the assessment." Behind him, one of the flat-eyed men in suits shifted his weight, and Beatrice noticed that he was not watching the doctor. He was watching her. His eyes had followed her fingers to the girl's throat and stayed there. She filed that away and said nothing. Reed straightened. He said the words in the low, careful tone doctors use, and he said them to the father, who had come to the doorway and could go no farther. The father's knees gave a little, and one of the security men caught his elbow. He said the time. He signed his name to the record, the pen moving with the awful smoothness of a decision already made, the ink drying on a lie he did not know was a lie. And Beatrice Gallagher stood at the foot of the bed with 2 fingers still resting against a child's throat, feeling the slow, secret, stubborn drum of a heart that would not agree it was finished. Dead doesn't stay warm. She had learned that in a country she was not supposed to have been in, from a woman who taught her things that were not in any nursing manual. Dead goes cold from the center out, like a fire dying inward. This child was cold at the edges and warm at the core, and there was only one thing Beatrice had ever seen that did that to a body, and it was not death. It only wore death's coat, and wore it well enough to fool a signed physician and every machine on the floor. The room emptied the way rooms empty around the dead. Reed went to write his notes. A nurse came to begin the quiet undoing that follows, the gathering of tubes, the stilling of machines, the small mercies performed on behalf of the gone. And Beatrice, who was only the night nurse, said she would sit with the child until the family was ready. No one argued. No one wanted the job. Grief is easier to hand to the woman no one notices. "You sure, Bea?" the younger nurse asked, already halfway out the door. "You don't have to." "I'm sure," Beatrice said. "Go on, I've got her." So they left her alone with the girl and the flat green line, and Beatrice waited until the door clicked shut and the footsteps faded. Then she pulled the chair close enough that the metal legs scraped the tile, and took the small cold hand in both of her own, and began, very quietly, to talk. "I know you're in there," she said. "I know you can't answer. That's all right. You just keep that little heart going, slow and small, and don't you listen to anything they say out in that hall. They're wrong. They don't know what I know, but I know it, and I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." She rubbed the child's fingers between her palms, warming them, and as she did, her thumb found the scar on her own hand, and she thought, unwilling, of the last time she had held a hand this cold and refused to let go. The memory came the way those memories always came, not gently, but all at once, complete. She had been another woman then, younger. She had carried a different name on documents that no longer existed anywhere. She had been a medic, though that word did not cover the half of it. Embedded with people whose work was done in the spaces between countries, in rooms that were not on any map. And once, in a village where the well had been poisoned as an act of war, she had watched a man she was trying to save go into a stillness exactly like this one. Cold at the edges, warm at the core, a heart slowing toward a beat you had to be patient and quiet and half in love with the world to find. There had been an old field doctor there, a man with hands like tree roots, and he had taught her a thing the careful institutions of her own country did not quite believe in. A neurotoxin, he told her, of a particular and terrible kind. It did not kill, it hid. It dropped the body into a stasis so deep it counterfeited death down to the last honest sign, and if you buried the person, as their families, weeping, so often did, you buried them alive in the dark. But if you knew what you were looking at, and you were willing to do a hard and delicate and unauthorized thing, you could sometimes call them back across that black water to the shore. She had done it twice in her life. It had worked once. The odds were not good, 1 in 2, and she had already spent her one, but she had built a whole life out of being the person who stayed when the odds said go, and she was not about to become someone else at 2 in the morning, with a child's pulse ticking under her fingers. She rose and opened the door a careful inch. The hall was busy with the low choreography of grief. The father sat now, folded over his own knees, a big man made small. Reed stood some distance off, speaking to one of the suited men, in a voice pitched for authority. And that man, older than the others, silver at the temples, with the unhurried stillness of someone very high up, was not listening to the doctor. He was looking at the door Beatrice stood behind. At Beatrice. Their eyes met for half a second before she drew back. She knew that kind of stillness. She had worked for men who had it, and against a few. It was the stillness of someone whose actual job was never the one printed on the card he handed you, and of a man who was, at that moment, beginning to wonder about the plain nurse who had objected to a doctor's certainty and then gone very quiet. She shut the door. What she was about to do was not in any protocol. It used a compound locked in the crash supply for a wholly different purpose, in a dose and a sequence no board would ever have approved, timed against the slow, secret metronome of a heart that officially was not beating. If she was wrong, she would be the nurse who desecrated a dead child, and she would spend what remained of her life answering for it. If she was right, and it failed anyway, she would be the same. There was no version of this where she walked out clean. She thought about it exactly as long as it took to look at the girl's face again, the faint banked warmth beneath the lips, the small clenched jaw of a child holding on in the dark and waiting for someone, anyone, to know she was still there. Then she went to work. She moved the way she had not let herself move in 11 years. Fast, economical, every motion a word in a language she had promised herself she'd forgotten and found. Now, she remembered perfectly. The body does not forget what the body once knew. She drew what she needed. She tapped the syringe and watched a single bubble climb and burst at the needle's mouth. Her hands did not shake. The scar on her thumb caught the light. She found the slow heartbeat again, marked its terrible unhurried rhythm, counted it against the second hand of her watch, and began to time herself against it, because the thing had to be given between beats, in the long dark valleys of that rhythm, or it would do nothing at all, or worse than nothing. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured, low and even. "Come back the way you came, slow, no rushing. I've got you. I've got the door, and I'm holding it open. You just walk." She gave the first measure. Nothing. The green line stayed flat, because the green line had never been able to see this child at all, had never once in the whole long night told the truth. She waited. She counted the valleys, 1, and the long dark, and 2. She gave the second. And under her fingers, so faint that a person who did not know to hope for it would have missed it entirely, the slow drum changed, just slightly, just enough. A heart that had been ticking at the very floor of the possible lifted itself, painfully, one rung up out of the dark. Beatrice let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like a decade. "There you are," she whispered, and her eyes stung, and she did not stop them. "There you are. Good girl. Keep coming." It was then that the door opened. She had locked it. She was almost certain she had locked it. But important men carry keys, and the door swung wide and the ambassador was standing in it. He had come to say goodbye, to hold his daughter while she was still warm. And what he saw was a large, plain woman he did not know bent over his dead child's body with a needle in her hand. He made a sound that was not a word. It was older than words. "Get away from her," he said. And then he said it louder, and then he was shouting it, shouting for security, shouting a word no one ever once aimed at them across a hospital room. "Assault," he was shouting. "She's doing something to my daughter. Get her away." And the two flat-eyed men were through the door before the sound finished, moving with the fast economy of men trained for exactly this, and one of them had Beatrice by the arm, hard. She did not fight him. A guilty person fights. A frightened person fights. Beatrice Gallagher, with a stranger's hand clamped iron hard on her arm and a father screaming that she was a monster, did not pull away and did not raise her voice and did not so much as flinch. She only turned her head, calm as still water at first light, and said one word: "Watch." "Get her out," the ambassador said, weeping now, the rage collapsing into grief mid-breath. "Get her out. Get her." "Sir." Beatrice's voice cut clean through the noise, low and level, the voice of a person who has stood in far worse rooms and kept her feet. "Sir, I need you to look at the monitor. Don't you touch the—" "I haven't touched it. I haven't been near it. Look at it." Something in the way she said it, the flat certainty of it, the total absence of panic in a room made entirely of panic, reached him, made him look, made them all look, the father and the two hard men and the older one now filling the doorway. The green line was no longer flat. It was small, it was slow, it climbed and fell in shallow, halting waves, spaced so far apart that between them the machine had nothing to say and fell silent. But it was there. On the screen Dr. Reed had trusted more than a living child. There was, unmistakably, undeniably, the signature of a beating heart. The room went utterly silent. Even the weeping stopped. The security man's hand was still on Beatrice's arm, but he had stopped pulling. He had, in fact, gone quite still. She let his hand stay where it was. She did not press her advantage. She simply stood in the loose grip of a man twice her size and watched the father watch his daughter's heart insist upon itself, over and over, and her own face was wet, though her voice had never once wavered. "She was never dead," Beatrice said quietly, into that silence. "She was hidden. There's a difference. A whole world of difference. There wasn't time to explain, and if I'd waited to be believed, you'd have lost her while I talked. So I did the thing first. I'm sorry it looked the way it looked." "Reed," the word came from the doorway. It was the older man, the one whose stillness Beatrice had recognized on sight. He had appeared without seeming to arrive, the way his kind did. "Get in here, now." Whatever else Dr. Reed was, he did not bluster when he came into that room and saw the line on the monitor that his own signature had already contradicted. He went white, all the pressed coat color draining out of his face, and then he went to work, because a doctor confronted with a living patient does not stop to save his pride. He picked up the slow rhythm with his own fingers. He confirmed it. He looked at the girl's core temperature and the color banked beneath her lips, and Beatrice watched the arithmetic in his head redo itself into a shape he did not like and could not argue with. "This isn't," he started. His voice was not steady. "A heart it doesn't restart. Not after asystole. This doesn't happen." "No," Beatrice agreed. "It doesn't. Not on its own." She looked at him steadily, without triumph, because there was no triumph in it for her, only the girl. "It didn't stop, doctor. It never stopped. It only slowed past what your machine was built to see. You're going to want to keep her cold now. Cold, not warm. Warming her fast will kill her. The stasis has to lift on its own timeline, or her heart can't keep up. Slow fluids, nothing sudden. and you need a toxicology screen for a compound your lab has never run, so you're going to need to call someone who has. Someone who won't be surprised by the question. Reed stared at her. In 11 years, he had never heard her voice for longer than a sentence at a time, and now she was standing in the wreckage of his certainty, telling him exactly what to do, in words she could not possibly have learned, changing linens on a night floor. "Who are you?" he said. Beatrice did not answer. She had learned a long time ago not to answer that question, in any of the languages it had ever been asked of her. But the older man in the doorway did. "Do what she says," he told Reed. "All of it, every word." And then, to the security men, in a voice that had never once needed to be raised to be obeyed, "Let her go. She's not the threat in this room. She may be the only reason there isn't going to be a funeral." The hand left her arm. Beatrice flexed it once and turned back to the child, because the child was the only thing in the room that had ever mattered to her, and she took up the small, warming hand again and murmured, "Good girl. Slow and easy. Nobody's rushing you. I've still got the door." The father was on his knees now beside the bed, looking at Beatrice with an expression she had seen only a few times in her life, the look of a person handed back something they had already begun to grieve. He tried to speak and could not. He reached out and took her wrist, not to pull her away this time, but to hold on, the way a drowning man holds a rope thrown from a shore he never expected to see again. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words came apart in his mouth. "God forgive me. I thought you were... I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "You saw a stranger bent over your child with a needle," Beatrice said, gently, not pulling her wrist away. "You did exactly what a father should do. Don't you carry that? There's no room in her recovery for your guilt. She needs you steady now, not sorry. Can you be steady?" He nodded, though he was shaking. "Yes." "Then that's the job," she said. "Be steady, and be here, and let her hear your voice. She can hear you. She's been able to hear all of it. Give her something good to come back to." He pressed his daughter's cold hand to his mouth and began, in a low, wrecked whisper, to give it to her. The name of the dog at home, the color they were going to paint her room, the promise of a summer they had both stopped believing in an hour ago. And the child's heart kept its own small time beneath the words. They moved Mila to a proper room, and the wing changed around her from the inside out. It filled with people who did not wear scrubs, men and women in plain clothes with the same watchful stillness the older man had, who stood in doorways and missed nothing. The ambassador's daughter, it emerged, had not simply collapsed at dinner. There were things about that dinner, and about a small, unremarkable person on the catering staff, who was, by dawn, nowhere to be found, that no one in that hospital would ever be told in full. But Beatrice knew. She had known the moment she saw a child counterfeit her own death so perfectly that a signed doctor was fooled, because there were only a few things in the world that did that, and every one of them was made by human hands for a purpose that was never kind. She said nothing to anyone. It was not her secret to spend. The older man found her near the coffee machine some hours later, when the sky beyond the windows had gone from black to the bruised gray of almost morning. She was leaning against the wall with a paper cup she wasn't drinking, and she looked, for the first time all night, tired. The tiredness of someone who has spent a coin she did not know she still carried. "Nurse Gallagher," he said. "You already know it isn't the first name I ever answered to," she said, not looking at him. "So let's not do the part where you pretend to be surprised, and I pretend not to notice your pretending. It's late. We're both too old for it." He almost smiled. "No," he agreed. "I'm not surprised." He came and stood beside her against the wall, shoulder to shoulder like old soldiers. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge of command and become simply a man's voice. "We ran the compound," he said. "It matched a profile our people have seen exactly twice, both times a long way from here. One of those times the file describes a field reversal, a recovery from apparent death, performed by an embedded medic, against every rule there was. The medic was never named. There's a clean, deliberate gap in the file where the name should be." He turned his head to look at her. She walked away not long after, disappeared into ordinary life so completely that everyone who might have looked for her assumed she wanted to be left there. So we left her. We shouldn't have needed a poisoned child to find her again. I've been standing here thinking about all the years she spent invisible, while men who did a tenth of what she did got medals for it. You didn't find her, Beatrice said. She found the girl. There's a difference, he echoed, and this time he smiled, tired and real and a little amazed. You keep saying that tonight. Hidden, not dead. I'm beginning to think that's the whole shape of how you see the world. It's the only part that matters, she said. Everything else is bookkeeping. Then a door opened, and Beatrice saw the child's father come out of Mila's room, and she saw on his face the thing every night nurse works 1,000 thankless shifts, hoping to glimpse just once. He had been in with his daughter, holding her hand and being steady the way he'd promised, and sometime in that gray hour she had opened her eyes. Not fully, not for long. The stasis was lifting the way Beatrice had promised, slow and grudging, a tide going out one reluctant inch at a time. But Mila had surfaced enough to squeeze her father's hand and to say, in the small cracked voice of a child waking from the deepest sleep there is, that she was cold, and could she have a blanket, and where was her spoon from dinner? And a father who had wept in a hallway and begged forgiveness of a stranger got to hear his dead daughter complain that she was cold and ask after a spoon, and it was, he would say for the rest of his life, the most beautiful sentence in the English language. They tell me she woke, the older man said. She's a long way from safe yet, Beatrice said. Days, not hours. Her heart's got to relearn its own speed, and there'll be a bad stretch when the toxin fully releases and her body remembers all at once that it's been holding still for hours. But yes, she woke. That's the part that can't be taken back. She woke. Because of you? Because her heart was stubborn, Beatrice said. I just knew how to listen for it. That's all I ever do. I listen for the ones nobody else can hear anymore. Dr. Reed found her too, before the shift ended, and that took more from him than facing the room had. It is one thing to be wrong in a crisis, when there's no time to feel it. It is another to walk down a hallway in the flat, honest light of morning and stand in front of the woman you spent years not seeing and say out loud that she saw the thing you missed. He stopped a few feet from her, hands buried in the pockets of his white coat, and he could not quite find a place to put his eyes. The talk screen came back, he said. The compound, the protocol, the warming, all of it, exactly the way you called it, down to the timeline. He stopped, started again, and this time it cost him more. I signed the record. I called the time of death out loud in that room. I told a father his daughter was gone and she wasn't. She was right there under my hands, listening, and the only person who... He stopped a third time, and when he went on, his voice had dropped past the doctor, past the pride, to the plain frightened truth of the thing. I've been a physician for 19 years. I looked at that child and I saw what I expected to see. You looked at the same child and you saw her. That's the difference between us, and I don't think I'm going to be able to unfeel it. Beatrice regarded him for a long moment. She had watched a great many confident people walk face first into the wall of their own certainty, and there was no kindness in salting a wound that had finally opened on its own. You did what the numbers told you, she said. They were built for ordinary hearts, and they're right almost every single time. Hers wasn't ordinary tonight, that's all. Once in 19 years they lied to you, and it happened to be a night I was standing in the room. She paused, and something in her softened. It's not a small thing, what you just did. Most men in that coat would have found a way to make it my fault by now. They'd have had a story ready. You came and told the truth. Remember that you did that. Remember it longer than you remember the mistake. It'll matter more, in the end, than tonight ever will. Reed looked at her, and the pressed coat certainty he had worn buttoned to the throat for 19 years came loose at one corner and did not go back, and he did not try to make it. Beatrice, he said, just her name. He had never once used it in all their years on the same floor. He said it now like a man carefully setting down a heavy thing he had forgotten had any weight to it at all. Thank you, for the girl, and for not letting me be the reason she was gone. She nodded. That was all. Between two people who had spent years as strangers on the same floor, it was enough. and neither of them needed to say another word about it ever again. The sun came up over the city, cold and clean and indifferent, the way it comes up over every place that has just barely survived its own night. The night shift ended the way night shifts always do, in a slow trade of quiet words at a desk. Beatrice signed out. She got the same worn coat off the same hook, and her shoes that were not new and would not be new next year, and she rode down in the elevator with a paper cup of coffee she had finally, at some point in that long gray hour, actually finished. The older man was waiting in the lobby. "We can make this right," he said, falling into step beside her, as though they had agreed to walk together. "What was taken from your record? The name that got left out of the file. Recognition, the real kind." He stopped near the tall glass doors, where the morning light came in cold and flat across the floor. "You don't have to be furniture anymore, Beatrice. Just say the word, and I will personally see to it that the whole city learns what you did in that room." Beatrice stood in the lobby with the offer of her whole hidden life held out on an open palm by a man who genuinely had the power to deliver it. And she thought about it, honestly, for the length of one long, slow breath. She let herself imagine it. The room full of people, the name spoken aloud at last. Then she shook her head. "No," she said. He blinked. He had not expected it. "No? There's a girl upstairs," Beatrice said, "who is going to grow up now, who's going to have a whole long life full of ordinary mornings just like this one. Cold light, hot coffee, somewhere to be. And that life does not need my name attached to it anywhere. It doesn't need to carry the weight of how close it came. It just needs to happen, quietly, for years and years. The not knowing is part of the gift." She pulled her worn coat closer against the cold seeping through the glass. "I've never done any of it to be seen. The ones who do the real work are mostly never seen at all, and they make their peace with that early, or they don't last. I made mine a long time ago, in a much harder place than this. I just held the door open long enough for her to walk back through it. That was always the whole job." The man looked at her for a long moment, and whatever he had expected to feel in that cold, bright lobby, it was not the thing he found himself feeling, which was something very close to reverence. "There should be a word," he said quietly, "for people like you." "There is," Beatrice said. She put her hand flat against the glass door and pushed, and the cold morning came in to meet her. "Nurse." And she walked out into the ordinary day, one plain woman among 10,000 on the waking streets, entirely unremarkable in her worn coat and her tired shoes, carrying inside her a life that not one soul around her would ever guess at.